So let's kick things off with our first insight then. The burden of past betrayals. It's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it? That as we rack up life experience, we also, well, inevitably we collect some scars. And not just from big dramatic events, but maybe those quieter moments where trust was breached or we felt dismissed or, we opened ourselves up only to get hurt. What does that mean for our social lives when these old echoes, they start to resonate more distinctly as we get older?
It's a really powerful point. You can think of this as a kind of quiet armor shaped by experience. It's not always comfortable, this armor, but sometimes it feels essential. When you've lived long enough to see how easily trust can be broken, maybe how quickly people can fade from your life, well, you naturally begin to guard your time, your heart, your energy more carefully. We're not talking about becoming cold or totally withdrawn here.
Yeah.
It's more about becoming discerning.
Okay.
Psychologists sometimes talk about this concept of relational fatigue.
Relational fatigue.
Yeah, where just maintaining connection starts to feel more draining than rewarding, especially if you've navigated some emotional hardships. It's not bitterness exactly, but it's a deep understanding forged from life's highs and lows. And that leads to a more deliberate choice, often for peace over, let's say, forced closeness. We found a great example of this. Chloe Hour, she's 81. She used to host these really vibrant weekend dinners at her home, just buzzing with energy. But slowly, her enthusiasm, it just waned. Some friends faded away. One broke her trust. Another just kind of vanished after her husband passed away. These weren't huge dramas, just a slow accumulation of small heartaches.
Little things adding up.
Exactly. So these days, she prefers solitude, not because she dislikes people, but because she treasures that calm more than the pretense of constant company.
That makes so much sense, that cumulative effect, all those small hurts. And it raises an interesting question. Once you start guarding that emotional energy, does it impact your tolerance for just like everyday conversation too?
Oh, absolutely. It often leads us straight into our second reason. The longing for peace over idle chatter.
Yes. And here's where it gets really interesting for a lot of people, I think. Remember those younger days? We might have sat through, endless conversations that, if we're being honest, lacked real depth. Small talk, maybe rumors, just words used to fill the silence. But as we age, that patience for the superficial stuff, it often just melts away, doesn't it? Quiet no longer feels awkward, actually feels restorative, almost sacred.
Precisely. Silence really does become a sanctuary for many. As that emotional energy becomes more guarded, the need to impress other people, it just vanishes.
Right.
The pressure to socially perform, it just kind of dissipates. And what emerges is this deep hunger for what's genuine, for sincerity, for meaningful connection. And as that's not there, well, many would much rather spend an evening with a good book or maybe a warm cup of tea than surround themselves with voices that actually leave them feeling more alone than before they even arrived.
That's a powerful thought.
It is. And this isn't about being distant. It's a quiet strength, really. It's intentionality. A choice about where you invest your precious time and who you truly let into your inner space. It's about protecting your peace without feeling like you need to apologize for it. Think about Henry. He's 76, a former salesman. He once absolutely thrived on interaction, effortlessly working a room. But these days, he actively avoids constant mingling. He often skips large family gatherings unless he feels truly up for it. And when asked why, his reply is simple. I'm done talking just to fill the air.
Wow.
He doesn't seek isolation. He seeks meaning. Less noise, more substance.
Done talking just to fill the air. Yeah, I think a lot of listeners can probably relate to that sentiment. And it ties into our next point too, doesn't it? The sense that people don't get you anymore. There often comes a moment, maybe you look around and realize the world has shifted, and so have you. The slang feels unfamiliar, maybe the beliefs are different. Even just the pace of conversations can feel overwhelming. And in the middle of all that change, you might start to feel a bit invisible or unheard, simply disconnected. Is this just a feeling, or is there something deeper going on?
Oh, it's definitely rooted in something real, that feeling of not being truly heard. It's a quiet, yet really powerful reason for withdrawal. It's profoundly exhausting to be in situations where your thoughts are just dismissed, or maybe your experiences are minimized. There's a psychological term for this, emotional invalidation.
Emotional invalidation. Okay.
Yeah. It's when your feelings are quietly dismissed or minimized. It might not be overt rejection, but it's through those small, subtle moments that just accumulate over time. And many older adults experience this more than we often talk about, and it can be profoundly alienating.
I can see that.
So it's vital to remember your thoughts still matter. Your voice still holds meaning. Just because others sometimes fail to hear you doesn't mean you've lost value. It might simply mean you've outgrown certain conversations. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. Sometimes the answer isn't to force your way into their world, but find spaces where you don't have to justify yourself so much, where simply being you is enough. We saw this with Ella, a 79-year-old former school teacher. She used to love sharing stories with her younger relatives, about raising 5 kids and working full-time, big life experiences.
Right.
But now she shares they rarely ask questions. And when she speaks, they might politely check their phones.
Ouch.
Yeah. It creates this feeling of disconnection despite all her wisdom, almost like a canyon opening up between them over time.
That's a powerful image, yeah. A canyon of disconnection. And it makes me wonder, could that feeling of being unheard, could it also feed into another quiet worry we found in our sources, which is the fear of being a burden?
Absolutely. There's a strong link there. This is a really quiet worry that can settle in as we age. It's not just about sickness, but about being a weight, to the people we hold dear. It's a fear that often hard to articulate, but it can be surprisingly pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to disturb someone's packed schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You hesitate to reach out for help, maybe even when you really need it. And so what happens? You go quiet, you stay in more, you keep your distance. It's usually not about stubbornness or a lack of desire for connection. It's more about self-respect and just not wanting your presence to feel like a responsibility.
So it's that deeply human desire for independence then, even if it leads to a kind of self-imposed isolation sometimes.
Precisely. And it creates this really challenging internal conflict. Think about it. The more you might need to depend on others, the less you want to. Especially after maybe a lifetime of being strong, of being the helper, the one everyone else leaned on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, asking for support feels unfamiliar, maybe even uncomfortable. And this fear, it often stems from that deep human wish to be loved freely, not out of obligation. So when it feels like your presence might cause stress, you might begin to pull away. You'd rather be by yourself than feel like you're a responsibility. Now, it's important to say, for those who genuinely care, your needs will likely never be seen as a burden.
Right.
They'll probably be embraced as an honor.
Right.
But still, that fear often persists, and it can profoundly influence choices. Look at Herbert, an 84-year-old widower. He used to spend every weekend with his daughter's family, but as his mobility worsened, he started declining invitations more often. When asked, he explained, "I don't want them reshaping their lives around me. They've got careers, children, I'll just be in the way." Even though his family probably never made him feel like a nuisance, his fear of being a problem just outweighed his longing for closeness.
Herbert's story is really poignant. It shows that complex inner dialogue so well. And sometimes it's not just a specific fear like Herbert's, but simply the natural progression of life that shifts relationships. Which leads us to reason number 5, the quiet fading of old relationships. Some connections, they don't end in big arguments or dramatic goodbyes, do they? They just sort of drift apart. People head down different paths, priorities evolve, and life slowly, maybe almost unnoticeably, tugs you apart. What does that mean for our social landscape as we get older?
Yeah, it's an incredibly common experience. Friendships that were formed around specific life phases, maybe raising children together, working at the same place, being neighbors, they often don't last when those seasons shift. It's natural. As you move further into later life, you might find yourself surrounded by people who, they no longer really align with who you're becoming. And this isn't necessarily a loss in a purely negative sense. It can actually be a kind of progress.
Progress? How so?
Well, when you begin to value your time and energy more, you naturally become more intentional about who you give it to. It's not that you've outgrown them in some sort of superior way, but you understand your own evolving needs better. Sometimes letting go is a conscious decision. It comes from respecting these shifts in yourself and realizing that closeness without real connection, that can feel far lonelier than actual solitude.
That's a really key insight. Closeness without connection.
Exactly. Old companions who once maybe lifted you up might now feel tiring. Conversations that once flowed might now feel strained, forced. And instead of forcing it, you choose space. Not from anger, usually, but from a place of deep self-respect. We saw this with Victoria. She's 73. Her weekly strolls with her best friend from high school. They dwindled to monthly, then yearly, and eventually they just stopped. There was no conflict, no big tension, just this quiet understanding that the connection had faded because Their paths had really diverged, and as Victoria put it, they'd said everything they needed to say.
They'd said everything they needed to say. Wow, that's such a powerful and graceful way to describe it, actually. And that leads us, I think, perfectly to our final and maybe the most profound insight, the joy of being on your own. What does it truly mean to stop chasing company and actually begin to cherish solitude, not from a place of hurt or emptiness, but from realizing that, your own presence is enough?
Yeah, this shift often puzzles other people, doesn't it?
It can, yeah.
They might worry. They might assume you're withdrawing out of sadness or isolation. But in reality, you might just be tuning into something much deeper, a rhythm that's maybe softer but richer, a life that's less noisy but potentially more meaningful. There's a rare kind of peace that can settle in when you realize you don't have to explain yourself anymore or impress anyone or pretend to be someone you're not. For years, maybe you were constantly surrounded by people, through work, through family, barely having a moment to just pause, to sit quietly, to hear your own inner voice without distraction. And once you finally experience that quiet, maybe for the first time consistently, it can become sacred. It's not detachment, it's insight. The kind of quiet understanding that perhaps only comes after years of giving and stretching yourself thin and showing up for others. Solitude, when it's chosen, becomes a refuge. It's where you recover, where your thoughts can grow, and where your truest self can just breathe freely. The older you become, the more you might understand that some of your most peaceful days don't actually include anyone else at all. Think about James, 82 years old. He was once highly social. His home was the hangout spot. His laughter was always the loudest.
Okay.
But in recent years, he finds much greater joy just sitting and watching birds from his porch than hosting big gatherings. When asked if he ever feels alone, he just sort of smiles and says, "I've got enough memories in my head to keep me busy for days."
That's wonderful.
What he's found isn't loneliness, it's a profound sense of peace, a contentment in his own company.
So, today's deep dive has really shown us that stepping back from social life as we age, it isn't necessarily about falling apart or disengaging. It's often a profound transformation. It's about becoming wiser, maybe more discerning, and truly respecting your own rhythm and your own needs. There's real honor in chosen solitude, isn't there? There's power in knowing your limits, and true freedom in no longer feeling you have to prove your value through constant connection or just busyness. It's about achieving a kind of clarity, maybe, regarding what genuinely lifts you up and what merely drains you. And that clarity, well, that's truly one of the great blessings of getting older, I think.
Which raises an important question, maybe for you, the listener, to consider. If you found yourself pulling back from people lately, what underlying reason might actually be driving your choices? Could it be that what you're truly craving is alignment with your deepest self, rather than just distance or disconnect? It's definitely a moment for deep reflection, not regret.
We really hope this deep dive resonated with you today and offered something of significant value. We'd genuinely love to hear what insight stood out to you the most. Maybe leave a comment below. Your voice matters to us, and your engagement helps us understand what kinds of deep dives really connect with you.
And if you've enjoyed this exploration, we'd be thrilled if you'd subscribe to our channel. Your support really helps us continue distilling important knowledge and crafting these deep dives that hopefully empower you with clarity and insight.
We are so glad you chose to spend this time with us today.